I want to thank the Great Lakes Environmental Festival for having me. My name's Vial, and I lead the engagement team at the Michigan Environmental Council. So today I want to talk to you guys about kind of the current political conditions in Michigan that are teeing up for some really positive opportunities to protect our environment and prevent climate change. So it's pretty exciting because I feel like I'm sure a lot of you have been climate activists and environmental activists for some time, and I think we all know that there haven't been very many opportunities in the last couple of decades where we can say we've got good news. So a little bit about the Michigan Environmental Council. We are an organization based in Lansing, started in 1980 by a handful of local environmental organizations across the state. So those were West Michigan Environmental Action Council, East Michigan Environmental Action Council, Detroit Audubon, Michigan Audubon, and the Sierra Club. And these were groups that said, you know, we have these local efforts that we work on, but we don't have anyone working for us and our interests in the capital, in Lansing. So they got together, they formed the Michigan Environmental Council, which I think for about 10 years only had one employee. That employee was a registered lobbyist with the state, and he hung out at Michigan State Capitol trying to advocate for greater environmental protections for the state of Michigan. So today we're a team of about 16. We have about 90 member organizations across the state. And we pride ourselves on being an organization that develops relationships with lawmakers. For a long time, when we had a Republican majority in the House and Senate, we had to be making sure that we were developing really good relationships with both sides of the aisle, right? And framing environmental issues as conservation issues, right? And trying to get across to lawmakers that this isn't a partisan issue, this is a bipartisan issue. But now, as we'll talk about today, we have slightly friendlier conditions in the legislature. So the programs we focus on are energy and climate, environmental health, urban lands and infrastructure, land and water conservation, groundwater, surface water, and agriculture. And we have a special program focusing on the city of Detroit for its unique environmental justice challenges. So our movement, this is something that we've been really focused on, especially in the last 6 months, teeing up to the election and seeing the election results, which were a big surprise for us. So we've got about 90 members and counting across the state of Michigan. We interface with these members to develop our policy priorities, so they tell us what to work on. They are our eyes and ears on the ground across the state of Michigan. They're the ones doing the water testing. They are the ones, keeping an eye on CAFOs in their local communities who are polluting. They are the ones helping connect parents, test kids for lead. In places like Flint, Benton Harbor, and the city of Detroit. So in my role, I lead a couple of our coalitions that we run consistently. They are the Detroit Environmental Agenda and the Michigan Alliance for Lead-Safe Homes. Right now, we have a bill in the House and the Senate that would require universal lead testing for children across the state of Michigan, which is huge. Michigan is the 5th worst state in the country for lead poisoning in children. Right now, we only require testing for kids who are on Medicaid, which is great, but over the pandemic, a lot of kids were not making it to their well child visits. So we know we need renewed action to make sure that we are testing all children across the state for lead. So a little overview of what we're gonna talk about today. The new majority in the Michigan legislature, how MEC sets our policy priorities and how we hope to achieve them in this new landscape in Lansing, and how we're building the movement to make it happen. So a little recap of what got us here last year. There are 3 really big events nationally and in the state of Michigan that sort of allowed or that enabled a Democratic majority in the Michigan State House and Senate, right? So we had our redistricting campaign. You guys remember that? So that was huge, right? I mean, we've had really gerrymandered districts for a really long time. Redistricting allowed an independent commission to redraw the state House, state Senate, and the congressional districts for the state of Michigan. We also had the ARPA and Infrastructure Act on a national level, right? So those two pieces of legislation was an infusion of more cash than we have seen. You know, it was a sort of a once-in-a-lifetime influx of dollars into our state and into every state in the country, and really primed or put us in a really good position to fund some of the sorely needed environmental investments. We also had the development of the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. I don't know, did anybody participate in some of those working groups or anything? So this was an effort that Governor Whitmer put together. She wanted to create basically a sustainability plan for the state of Michigan. So this plan sets goals to get us to carbon neutrality by 2050. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. You can find it on Eagle's website. It covers, you know, sort of the big issue areas, right? Like transportation, energy production, building decarbonization, transportation, right? Those are sort of the four biggest carbon emitting sectors. We have a Democrat in the governor's office. We got both legislative chambers, but there's slim majorities, right? So that we only are up by 2 votes in the House. I think it's 56 to 54, and only by 1 in the Senate. We also have an enhanced national presence for Whitmer, right? She's been an incredible leader during the COVID pandemic, and that got her a lot of press. People were whispering about, you know, is she gonna run for president in 2024? So, you know, she's been really out on the forefront, a lot of progressive issues, which has been great for us, great for Michigan. So at the beginning of every legislative session, what we do as the Michigan Environmental Council is we try to meet with as many of our members as possible. We want to find out what they're working on, what they're worried about, and identify what we can do at the state level to make their lives and their work easier. So I think we hit a record last year. We met with 35 members, which is a little over a third. And what we do is we take all this feedback and we assemble sort of a laundry list of environmental priorities. This becomes sort of the main environmental agenda for the legislative session in Michigan. And then from that, we kind of create with our policy staff, right? We've got a team of 6 policy staff. They're the lobbyists in Lansing. And they all have their own issue areas that I mentioned earlier. And we kind of create what are sort of the banner issues that we want to work on? What are the big priorities that we really want to try to pass before the next election cycle when we might lose these majorities? So our big one that we are working to get introduced right now, this is going to be a legislative package. We're calling it Healthy Affordable Homes. So with the ARPA and Infrastructure Act dollars that we got, Michigan had at the beginning of this budget session a $9 billion budget surplus, which is huge, right? We've never had anything like that before. A lot of those dollars have gotten allocated, but we still have, I think $4 billion or so into the education fund, and we still have a $2.5 billion surplus in the general fund. What we would really like to see with some of these influx dollars, and this is in keeping with the, the guidelines from the Infrastructure Act, and especially the President Biden's Justice 40 initiative, which requires 40 cents of every dollar be spent in environmental justice communities. So we want to use some of this money to create a funding source for new housing and retrofits for existing housing that would make homes in Michigan for affordable and low-income housing energy efficient, right? So we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from existing housing and from new housing, and make sure that, I mean, the whole country is feeling a housing crisis right now, right? We need more housing. We need to make sure that when we build that housing, that it's energy efficient, that it is resilient, and will be available for Michiganders for decades to come. So sort of the breakdown of that, I know 1.5 billion, that's a huge number, right? So a little bit of a breakdown. So 500 million for existing affordable housing and to build new moderate to low income housing. Just under $1 billion to create equal resources into home retrofit programs, right? So that's really, that's going to be really sorely needed in a lot of our communities that have older housing in the state of Michigan. I think something around 70% of houses in the state of Michigan were built before 1978. So that means they have lead paint in them, probably. They might not have very good windows. They could stand to get, tankless hot water heaters and heat pumps, right? All of these things would help them be carbon neutral. So, and lastly, 55 million to fund workforce development initiatives. So this part is really huge, right? We really need more workers in the workforce who have the skills to do all this stuff, just generally, right? And this added, there's this added point now of training workers who can do specifically green retrofits and green construction. So the whole country is really behind on this. Whitmer's made some great moves to encourage folks to go back to sort of these workforce training programs. And we need more money to incentivize more people to get involved in this and to make sure that they know how to do things like install tankless hot water heaters and install heat pumps. If you call up your average contractor, they're not going to know how to do this yet. So we need to make sure that there's public funds available to make this happen. So the next one, this is the really the big one, right? So the comprehensive climate and energy reform. So the Michigan legislature has the power to require utilities in the state of Michigan to hit certain targets within their energy development portfolio or energy production portfolios, and demand that certain percentages of it come from renewable sources like wind and solar. So I'm excited to say that last week, or 2 weeks ago, it was during the Michigan Healthy Climate Conference, the state Senate actually introduced a bill package. So this is in Michigan, or the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan, that we should do this. We needed legislative action to get there. We're starting to see that legislative action, right? So, okay, 60% renewable by 2030 and 100% carbon-free standard by 2040. So this is huge, right? This would make Michigan a climate leader in the country. We can expect to see a lot of pushback from DTE and consumers. So that's why it's vital for all of us to make sure we are calling our representatives and our senators and telling them we support this bill package. This is the kind of stuff we need to make sure that we're doing our part to reduce global warming. The IPCC report from a couple months ago said, this is your last warning, right? We're out of time. And so this is the kind of legislation we need to make sure that we can keep global warming to under 2 degrees centigrade, or 3 degrees centigrade. All right, statewide septic code. This is, so Michigan's the only state in the country that doesn't have a uniform septic code, which is gross. So basically, communities across the state have like their own codes that they implement, but we don't have any uniform code to require inspections and repairs of septic systems. There are a lot of septic systems in the state of Michigan because we have a lot of rural communities. So when we don't have a statewide uniform code, that means that a lot of human waste is getting into our water table. So critical dune protection. So this is exciting because we are about only a mile from one of the critical dune sites in the state of Michigan. It's right down this river here where the Manistee River reaches Lake Michigan. So we used to have in the state of Michigan critical dune protections. They were rolled back in 2012, I think, under the Snyder administration. But protecting these dunes are so important for the natural habitats, all of the plants and animals, wildlife that inhabit these dunes. Critical dunes are basically the entire coast of Lake Michigan along the lower peninsula. And so we would like to see a reinstitution of these critical dune protections to make sure that we are, protecting the state's natural beauty for generations to come. So the key points here: restoring the Critical Dunes Act, which we used to have, but the Republican legislature under Snyder took it away. Yeah. Next up, we have reforming Michigan's transportation infrastructure. This one is very close to my heart as a transit advocate in Detroit. My fiance and I, he's right there. We only have one car, and we live downtown, and we really like, walking and biking and using public transportation. But we know that that's not a reality for a lot of people across the state of Michigan. There's not enough bike infrastructure. There's not enough public transportation. And so right now, the way that funding is set up for MDOT, the Michigan Department of Transportation, they really, really, really heavily prioritize roads. They like expanding highways. The Michigan Department of Transportation actually measures economic development by vehicle miles traveled. So when people aren't driving, the Michigan Department of Transportation says, well, that means the economy's not doing well. So this is a systemic issue in Michigan that we need to decouple the idea of driving our personal gas-powered cars with the idea of economic development, right? We need to create walkable, livable, thriving communities that have more bike lanes and more bike paths for things like tourism and better public transportation. So what we would like to see happen within this legislative session, and I think we might actually get there, so use federal and state dollars to reduce lane miles instead of expand the number of miles on our highways. In the city of Ferndale, just north of Detroit, they're doing an amazing project right now. They're doing a road diet on Woodward. This is huge because Woodward was the first paved road in the United States. That's why it's called M1. So they are getting rid of lanes on both sides of Woodward, for dedicated bus routes and bike lanes. So we want to be able to make sure we can use federal and state dollars to do more of that across the state, and we want to see reform. We want to reform Act 51, which is the way that is the formula for how we fund transportation, so that we can. Right now, you can only use that funding for cars. We want to see state funding buckets prioritize investment in bike, pedestrian, and rail infrastructure. One thing we really want to do in the next 2 years too is expand the bottle deposit. I don't know how many of you guys were here yesterday for Dr. Tremore Spears' talk about microplastics, but as we know, I think it's, 22 million pounds of plastic pollution end up in the Great Lakes every year. A big way we can reduce this is by expanding the bottle bill. So right now, as we were talking about yesterday, this can't be recycled, right? And the reason for that is because when they passed the bottle bill, the beverage industry is its own huge lobby, and so they wanted to make the bottle bill based on content, what was inside the bottle, as opposed to what the bottle was made out of, which is why we can't recycle non-carbonated or containers that contain non-carbonated beverages. Also, things like Gatorade didn't exist when the bottle bill was first passed. Now they do. We need to make sure that we are recycling all of these different kinds of containers, not just pop, beer, etc. And last, but definitely not least, this is, they're all huge, but this one is especially huge, I think, for our waterways and the health of our citizens, is creating polluter pay laws, right? If a company like Dow Chemical is going to pollute our waterways and our lands, they need to be held accountable and pay for the remediation, right? We used to have polluter pay laws. Governor Milliken passed them, and Governor Engler quickly got rid of them. So we need to restore that in the state of Michigan because companies shouldn't feel free to pollute without any recourse, right? We need to make sure that that they are held accountable and to prevent them from doing it in the first place. So, like I said, we used to have, I think between 1990 and 1995, we had polluter pay laws. We want to bring those back and stop them from, either hold them accountable or stop them from doing it in the first place. So how do we get this all done? The big question. One thing that we've got a great team in Lansing who are lobbyists, and they go meet with lawmakers and work with lawmakers to introduce legislation and get it passed. But you know where the rubber meets the road, right? When these votes happen on these pieces of legislation, we need folks like you. We need environmental advocates all over the state to be part of our network, so that we can reach out and say, hey, we know you live in this district. That you live in the district of a lawmaker who is key to getting this piece of legislation out of the Energy and Environment House Subcommittee. So we really want to connect with folks like you guys who are part of environmental organizations across the state and bring you into our network. So we have 90 members, but we want to reach everybody in the state of Michigan who is passionate about environmental issues and is working on issues in their local community. So in this bigger magazine document back here, this is sort of a publication that we do every year to highlight the work that our members do. This one's theme is water. And if you look at the back, the second to last page, this is a list of all of our members and a map with where they are. And we'd love to add you guys to that list. So I forgot my business cards, which was inconvenient, but I do have my contact information posted up here, and I would love to meet with you guys and talk. So I'll be around for a little bit after this, and if you want to take my email or phone number and give me a call, love to set up a Zoom. I live in Detroit, so won't be available to meet for coffee next week, but would happily meet with you virtually. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Great discussion. Really appreciate it.
Well, hi everyone. Denise Keele. A little bit about myself. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yes, so I've been actually a farmer. I grew up in western Iowa on a farm. I was a forester before I went into policy work. I was a forester in the southeast. Tennessee is my undergraduate degree. One of the first prescriptions I wrote for a state forest, we got sued, and I thought, what's going on here? And so that's what prompted me to go to school for my PhD in environmental politics. And then I've been a professor in Kalamazoo at Western Michigan University for about the last 15 years. And while there, that's what all these pieces are. So this is always my why should you listen to me slide. We started a faculty climate change working group that moved a lot of our university policies along. I also served on our City of Kalamazoo and Township and County, which we now have a new position, which I'm very excited about, in writing those climate action plans. And but made a huge career change, and last June took over as director of the Michigan Climate Action Network. I'm really grateful for the speakers that went before me, because do not ask me technical questions, okay? I'm a political scientist, I'm a forester. You can ask me about farms and forests and trees, but mostly I do politics and I do people. So we're going to talk a lot today about some of the attitudes of Michiganders around climate change, what we need to do to continue to move those attitudes in the right direction, because our elected leaders, they actually will follow us, right? That's what we need to be doing to build the political will and the people and the movement that can actually, 5 is their starting point, not 2050. Again, what year is it? How fast do we need to move? Whoa, people. This is why we need all of you. Energy waste reduction. All right, I know this one is so important, and I know it reads very boring. Okay, why is this so important? Because the energy that we don't even use is the best energy saved. And I know this myself, I'm this climate advocate, and I want solar panels on my house so bad. And they were like, but you gotta do insulation first, Denise. And I was like, really? So I spent a whole bunch of money that's inside my walls that makes my house safer and more comfortable, so now I'm ready for those solar panels. There's still a ton of work that has to be done on just those kinds of pieces. It saves a lot of energy. We've got a great goal that is even more ambitious, again, than our My Healthy Climate Plan, to reduce all of our rest of our buildings by 17% by 2030. These are bills that are being written right now. And again, what I get to do is come talk to folks like you, go around the state and work with communities to understand what they're already trying to do and how helpful these bills can be. There's even more that's happened since I put these slides together. There is also a House bill. There was a little discussion in the last session about this distributed generation, and there's a cap on that to help the utilities. There is a bill to finally eliminate the cap now, which is something that advocates have been working on for an incredibly long time. There is also a bill to protect farmland. You want that solar on your farmland? How can we do that in a just and equitable way? And how can we make sure that farmers can keep on keeping their farms? There's so much in this package. It has been a flurry of activity. I timed it pretty well, I think, leaving academia. I left in June, took over. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act, right, at the federal level. Nobody knew that was going to happen. The Michigan legislature flipped, and we got all this public opinion coming our way. And so I feel like we do have the momentum, and we need to build on these different bills. The other piece that MyCan, Michigan Climate Action Network, really works on is halting fossil fuel, right? The easiest way to start thinking about climate emissions, you've heard maybe the bathtub analogy. Like if your bathtub is overflowing, what would be the first thing that you would do? You would turn the spigot off, right? So we gotta get rid of the fossil fuel infrastructure. And for us, it is Line 5 across the Straits of Mackinac that is the emblematic fossil fuel infrastructure, because that line is 70 years old tomorrow. It is just like our power plants, about 25 years past its lifetime, and it's imminent. That's a spill, an oil spill in the Great Lakes. This would go everywhere. Right? So to us, water is our home. We feel like this is the issue that can really galvanize folks around the idea that we also need to turn the spigot off, and we have to stop the fossil fuel infrastructure so that we can make this transition. One of the other pieces that is in that clean energy future plan that I was really pleased to see We have a Michigan Public Service Commission. That's who regulates our utilities. That's who approves projects like this. We now have the legislative backing us on this issue to, for the first time, require Michigan public agencies to include climate in their decision-making. Folks, this could be a sea change when we think about how government and agencies work. This is something a Michigan Climate Action Network has worked on for a long time. Yeah, that's the QR code. I see everybody get your phone out, do it. You come to our site. I told you I'd give you some actions. It's mired in Army Corps of Engineers and federal processes and state court. So the best action we're advising folks to do right now is to actually tell President Biden he could shut this down any day. It is currently operating illegally. Our governor has revoked the easement, but Enbridge and the fossil fuels, they got a lot more money than I do to run messaging campaigns, turns out, and are still operating. We have to stop this fossil fuel infrastructure, folks. And that is it. You got events, you got stuff you're doing. I'm so happy to be here at Great Lakes Environmental Festival and be sharing the word here. Tell us what you're doing. One of the best things that I can do is help connect you with other actors around the state, other communities who are doing this work, so that we can be that 7 in 10 and we can show up everywhere. And I think that's it. Thanks so much.